All right, so for this game, looks like we have what is a standard sequencing game. So we've got 6 positions to work with. Nothing especially out of the ordinary. We'll set up the 6 slots. And then we've got the elements themselves. We have U, V, W, and then X, Y, Z. And yeah, every single one just goes one at a time sequentially, 6 spaces. So nothing weird about this game. So let's take a look at the rules. So the first rule tells us that V has to go at some point earlier than Z. So we can line that up accordingly. Next, W and Z are each earlier than X. So we can say W and, actually wait, we already have a Z on the board. So let's use that. So we know that both W and Z are going to be earlier than X. So we can say Z is earlier than X and W is also earlier than X, which that's actually pretty good because that does make X pretty heavily restricted at the moment. The earliest it can go really is 4, which would lock the other guys in the first 3. So I guess that's worth noting. Anyways, next we are told that U is going to have to be in one of the last 3 positions. So I guess we can say U is in 4, 5, or 6. And lastly, Y has to be in the first 3. So Y has to be in 1, 2, or 3. And we can leave reminders of these. We can say Y is somewhere over here, and then U has to go somewhere among these guys. Although let's talk about X for a moment. We can't really put X into number 4, can we? Because if we put the X into 4, then that would lock VZW into 1, 2, and 3, and Y would have nowhere to go. So really, X can only go into 5 or 6. And depending on where exactly we put the X, we might be able to, for example, figure out where the U goes. So you know what? As usual, let's exhaust this. We can say that there's only 2 major plays here. Either we're going to have to put the X into 5, or we're going to have to put the X into 6. Now, in each of these scenarios, I guess U would have to go into one of the remaining 2, right? So either in this scenario 4 or 6, here go 4 or 5. In fact, actually, wait a minute. In this top scenario, really it seems like everything has to go before X except for U. So we have to have a VZW, and the Y is going to have to go somewhere around these 4 positions, which means the only person that really could and will have to go into position 6 would be U. So we can actually do a little bit more damage. This would have to be a U in this scenario. And I guess in the bottom scenario, that's a lot more flexible. That can move around. Yeah, so you know what? Let's see what we can do. Let's jump to the questions. Although before we do, I'm just going to label these templates A and B. And yeah, let's go. Question number 1. Which of the following cannot be in slot number 5? So we don't have a standard exclusion question, but we still do the first question first, no matter what. So what cannot go into 5? Well, obviously, we know that X effectively could go into slot number 5, so we can probably disqualify D unless we miss something. But otherwise, looking at our basic setup, this is probably, Y obviously can't go into 5, but that's not an option. But looking at these guys, V should stick out, right? Because V is before Z before X, so there's no way to put the V into the 5th position. And fortunately, that is an option, so the best answer to question number 1 is B. V certainly could not go 5th. Next, let's tackle the local question. So question number 2 says, if Z is earlier than Y, so let's see what we can do with that. If we have the Z as earlier than Y, I suppose that seems consistent with both of these scenarios, except wait a minute. Y has to go among the first 3 positions, doesn't it? And the V has to go before the Z. So really what's going to end up happening is that since Y has to go among the first 3, we're basically going to end up with a V, Z, Y setup in those first 3 positions. And then beyond that, we're pretty flexible. We have X and U, and we still have the W. So we're going to have obviously W before X, but then the U can shuffle them between positions 4, 5, 6. Let's see what we can do with the question. The question asks, what is the earliest that W could go? And I suppose that would be 4th. You could put the W here, and then you could have X and U, or U and X in 5 and 6. So the best answer to question number 2 is C. Next question, number 3. If V goes into slot number 3, well, once again, let's see what we can do with that information. If V goes third, now, if we look at our templates, I suppose that's still kind of consistent with both of these possibilities, isn't it? Because we could put a V here, and then this could be a Z, and that would be fine, and then W and Y are just going to shuffle in 1 and 2. Actually, something along those lines will have to happen no matter what, isn't it? Because if V is over here, we're going to have in these 3 positions, we're going to have to accommodate Z, we're going to have to accommodate X, and U still has to go among the last 3. So we don't know the exact sequence, but basically what we're going to have is we're going to end up with Z before X shuffling with the U among those last 3, which means in the first 2 positions, we're just going to have Y and W, and these guys can also flip. They can go either way. So to the question, what must be true? Answer choice A, U is before X, and no, because U can kind of shuffle between these guys, so that doesn't have to happen. B, W is before Z, and, well, actually, yeah, the W would definitely have to go before the Z. So the best answer to question number 3 is B. Just in case, let's take a quick look at the rest. Answer choice C, X before U, and no, again, these guys can shuffle back and forth. It doesn't have to happen. D, Y is before W, and no, again, these guys also can shuffle back and forth, so it doesn't have to happen. And E, Z is before U, and no, again, these guys can also, the U can shuffle between them, so that doesn't have to be true. So once again, the best answer here was B. Next, question number 4. We've got, if Z is immediately before W, so if we have a Z, W kind of block, so what does that do for us? Again, in terms of the templates, this looks like it can go either way. Both templates are legit, but what will happen? We're going to have an X to follow, and obviously before this whole thing, we're going to have the V. Now, okay, so wait a minute. You'll notice that there's not really any way to put the ZW block in 4, 5, because that would force the X into 6, and then U would have nowhere to go. But the same thing would happen on the earlier side. If we do ZW in 2 and 3, that would force the V into 1, and then the Y has nowhere to go. So we can't put the ZW into 3, and we can't put it into 4, 5. It looks like the only place it could go is kind of across here. It would have to go into 3 and 4. And then from there, you get a very kind of mirrored setup on both sides. You're going to end up with a U and an X splitting between these 2 positions, and a V and a Y splitting between these 2 positions. So to the question now, number 4, what must happen? Answer choice A, U is in 5, and we don't have that confirmed. B, V is in 1, same thing, not confirmed. X is in 5, again, not confirmed. Y is in 2, again, not confirmed. Z is in 3, and yes, that definitely has to be true. The best answer to question 4 is E. Next, we've got number 6 is our next local question. Let's take a look. If W is immediately before X, so let's see what we can do. If we have a W right before the X, what does that tell us? I suppose that kind of adjusts this whole thing, right? Because now you're going to have WX, but then Z and V are going to go still accordingly before that block. So we're going to have a Z before this and a V before that. And if that's the case, what does that tell us? Now, I suppose we cannot do WX in 3 and 4. Well, X can't go into 4, period, because we know X is either in 5 or 6. I suppose it doesn't tell us too much, to be honest. We're just going to end up with this W either in 4 or in 5, and everybody else kind of falls into place, don't they? So you know what, let's just see what we can do with that idea that the W is just going to end up either 4 here or 5 here. The question asks what could happen. Answer choice A, could we have a U in 5? And no, that wouldn't happen because either the W is here, but then X is here, or the W is in 5, so there's no opportunity for U either way to go into 5. Answer choice B, could we have a V in 3? And maybe, so if we, in this scenario, if we put a V over here, oh no, that's still not going to work because then we're going to have Z, W, X, and then U has nowhere to go, so that's not going to fly. Answer choice C, can we have a W in 3? And no, because we said W has to go into 4 or 5, so that's not going to work. Answer choice C is out. D, could we have a Z in 2? Actually, maybe that seems pretty safe. So in either one of these scenarios, if we run a Z into 2, the V would have to go before into 1, Y could go into 3, and then the rest are just going to go wherever. That actually seems okay. Let's hold on to it just in case, though. Answer choice E, could we do a Z in 4? And no, we get a similar issue as we had with a V. If we put a Z into 4, I mean, this scenario wouldn't work because W is already in 4. But here, even if we did ZW, U would have nowhere to go. So the best answer here is answer choice D for question number 6. Next, question number, so 7 is one of these modifier questions. Let's hold off for now. Let's take a look back to question 5. Which of the following is a complete list of bands that could go into number 1? Now, if we look at our history, so we've seen V potentially go first, and also W and Y could have split 1 over there. So V, W, and Y would have to be on our list. So that would easily get rid of answer choices A, B, and C. Answer choice D has V, W, and Y. We're good, and so does E. So the only difference between D and E now is Z. And could Z go first? And no, because Z has to go after the V. That's not going to work. So E is out. That leaves us with answer choice D as the correct answer to question number 5. Lastly, question number 7. Which of the following if we replaced the rule that W and Z are each before X? So we're trying to replace essentially this rule right here that W and Z are both before X. Now, just as a reminder, we're looking for something that always had to be true and something that, if true, would ensure that this restriction will be maintained. Let's see what we can do. Answer choice A. Only U can go later than X. Oh, this actually looks promising. So first of all, actually look at our templates. That definitely had to be true. U is the only person that ever could have gone after X. So that takes care of the did it have to be true? It did. And moreover, if we implement this as a rule, if we say that only U can go later than X, well, yeah, that would ensure that Z and W are definitely going to go before X. So that takes care of it. The best answer to question number 7 is A. For the record, though, let's take a quick look at the other one, see what they give us. Answer choice B. V is earlier than W. Now, actually right away, that should be noticeable because that's not true. V did not have to go earlier than W. We could have had W kind of pull all the way back into, in fact, we said position number 1. So this never had to be true. That would be a good enough reason to get rid of answer choice B. Next, answer choice C. V and W are each earlier than X. Now this can be really tempting, but the thing is, I mean, telling us that W is before X, awesome, but we also need to make sure that Z is before X as well. Now, when this rule tells us that V has to go before X, that doesn't tell us that Z does, because we do have a relationship between V and Z. So essentially we can say, look, we have to have a V before Z. That's true. And according to this rule, this tells us that V has to go before X. But that's connected to the V. That doesn't give us any relationship between Z and X. That doesn't tell us that Z has to go before X. Now, answer choice C obviously had to be true. Both V and W would have ended up before X. But implementing this as a rule would not have ensured that the Z goes before the X. So this is not a good enough answer choice. Answer choice C is out. Next, X is immediately before or after U. Now, I don't think that had to be true, to be honest. So that would have been a good enough reason to get rid of this. Because if you look at our templates, we could have easily placed a U over here, and then everybody else would have just fallen into wherever they do. And that would have worked. So because X and U didn't have to be consecutive, this never had to be true, we can get rid of answer choice D. Answer choice E. X is either in 5 or in 6. Now that had to be true. You'll notice that X always had to go into one of those two positions. But this wouldn't really get the job done, because simply by telling us that X is in 5 or in 6, that could easily have allowed for X to go, say, into position 5. And if we didn't have this rule, then that would have allowed for W, for example, to go into 6, and then U could have gone into 4. So if we implemented answer choice E as a rule, it wouldn't have ensured that W and Z are before X. So best answer, once again, is answer choice A.